All right, so this is going to be one of my more controversial opinions, but I feel pretty confident in it, which is that I do not consider Japan part of Asia. I actually brought this up to a friend of mine who's part Japanese, and he said Japan is either not Asian or the most Asian country. And I think that that's kind of accurate, but I side on the not Asian. So let me explain why. But before I do, um, here's where I've been in Asia. For people who don't know, I spent the past year traveling around the world. I spent about 5 months in Asia. I was in Japan, China, Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, and India. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, but I've gotten a pretty good feel of what it's like to be in Cambodia. I was there for a month. Of what it's like to be in Thailand. I was there for about 2 months total in my life. India, Indonesia. I kind of feel like what it's like to be in those places, and I've spent a month in Japan, and it feels completely different. But before I start, talking about why, I want to kind of steelman the opposite case. So the most obvious one is, appearances, right? Like Japanese people, just kind of look a lot like other Asian people. Um, you know, uh, this guy is Japanese, this guy is Korean, and this guy is Chinese. There's an obvious similarity, right? Um, Going from there, the location, it's in Asia. It's very clearly in Asia. It's not in Europe. It is geographically next to Asia, right? So that's also another reason why it's Asian is because it's in Asia. From there, you also have the food. You know what I mean? Japanese food uses a lot of soy sauce. You have a lot of soy sauce in, Chinese food, especially, and other Asian foods. You have fried rice, yakisoba, which is a Japanese dish, is also fried noodles, which you have in other Asian foods as well. So, similarity in food. Um, and then they're specifically when you look at Korean and Chinese, comparing it to Japanese, they use, you know, very similar alphabets. The languages sound pretty similar, especially if you compare them to European languages. The grammar is similar. They all originated from the same place, basically, right? Um, and then finally, religion. Japan is a Buddhist country. China technically doesn't have a religion because it's communist, but it's Buddhist. South Korea is Buddhist. A lot of Southeast Asia, like Indochina, is Buddhist. India, ironically, is not Buddhist. They're Hindu and Muslim, but still, like, you have this like similarity in religion, right? So these people look pretty similar. They're right next to each other. They eat a lot of the same food, and they speak a similar language, and they have a similar religion. So why do I not think that Japan is part of Asia? And just to kind of start out, and so I'm using like pictures from my time in Asia. Um, so like I don't have I didn't anticipate that I was gonna be making this video, so you have to take all these with kind of like, hey, these are kind of the best pictures I have available. But like these two pictures are from Japan, and these six pictures are from Thailand, Cambodia, India, and Indonesia. And like just walking around Japan, it just does not feel like the rest of Asia. It just doesn't. Japan, you know, Japan's just like a lot more orderly. You know what I mean? Like I think that like one of the trademarks of Asia. And by the way, I don't want to like speak in like gross stereotypes here. So like, you know, um, there's a huge difference. Like two things are kind of true, right? Like there's blanket stereotypes that you make about people, which you obviously shouldn't do. But there's also like cultures, and cultures is real, and like the way that different cultures interact with each other is fairly real, and you kind of need to consider that. And like I think that one of the hallmarks that I've noticed about Asian culture, not including Japan, is like it's pretty chaotic. Like for example, like one thing you'll see in Indonesia a lot, and also in Cambodia, um, I haven't spent enough time in China to see it there, but I've heard similar things. Is that like, in Indonesia, you're driving your motorcycle and you'll see a motorcycle on your right, and you'll see like, a father, you know his baby's strapped to his chest. He has a 2-year old by his feet. His wife is on the back with a basket of food with another kid on her back, and there's another kid like hanging on the side, right? Like, it's just, there's a lot of like chaos in Asia, and I think that, Asia in general feels really comfortable with chaos. One joke that I have about driving around in Asia is that, like, traffic laws in Asia are, if it's physically possible to do it, it must be legal, right? People jaywalk constantly. You have crazy traffic, and also like there's just like general like sense, like especially like you also see this with Asians in America, is like, oh, just get it done type of mentality, and it's a great mentality. Like, I'm not, like, none of this is a criticism of any culture whatsoever. I love Asia. I love Japan. Love all cultures, right? Well, Japan just doesn't really have that. Like if you saw that's like if I saw that scene that I just described to you in China, like, I'd be a little bit surprised, but I wouldn't be too surprised. But if I saw it in Japan, I'd be shocked. Like, I would not anticipate that in the slight. Like I would be like, what the hell is going on here, right? But again, like, you see that in Thailand, you see that in Indonesia, you see that a different version of that in India. Is just, and then, by the way, like, you can kind of point to these. These are both like very rural, very urban areas that, like, extreme. It's extremely clean as well. And like, I'm not saying that the rest of Asia is dirty, um, but it's not like as incessantly maintained as Japan. Like, Japan has like an aesthetic quality to it, where like you can tell that like the the public servants, or like whatever you want to call them, like, put a huge amount of dedication to making sure that everything looks nice, everything is manicured, everything is ordered, everything has a purpose. Well, in a lot of the rest of Asia, that's just not the case, right? And again, like, I love Cambodia. I want to go back to Cambodia. I love Thailand. If Thailand didn't have a 12-hour time difference between America and Thailand, I'd be in Thailand right now. I love China. I love all these countries. It's just a difference, right? And you kind of see that also, like, because I was thinking to myself, like, okay, this is just, like, it's like, okay, you were just in downtown Tokyo, so, like, you were just in downtown Osaka, so of course it looked all manicured. Although, you go to downtown LA and it's not the case, but that's a whole different conversation, right? But then I spent like a week in this town called Shimu, which is like very much, out in the country, completely away from everything. And you see, like if you look at this street again, like, we are kind of prisoners to the photos that I took. Like, it does not look like urban Indonesia. You know what I mean? Like, it just, I mean, rural Indonesia, right? And like, you go to the restaurants, like, you have these electronic, um, you know, food dispenser. I don't know the word, electronic waiters, like robots serving you, right? And like, you don't have that even in like the main cities in like Cambodia, right? Um, and so, like, well, I'm pretty sure your thought is right now is like, okay, but like Japan, that just means that Japan is richer than the rest of Asia, right? And like, yes, that is true. And I think this is like where we're gonna start talking about like macroeconomic points, right? Is that, like, if you look at like Japan in comparison to the rest of Asia, like, it's not just their GDP, right? Like, this is, in case you can't see, like, this is Malaysia, this is Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Cambodia. And these are the Asian tigers, with China instead of Taiwan. But just like look at like the numbers don't matter. Just look at the direction of the graphs, right? Where like Japan had huge economic growth, but since the 1990s has been stagnating and has been going down, while the rest of Asia is just going up. Sorry, it's just going up, right? And like, it's just a different energy. It's just like these countries are in a different place in their development right now. Um, all of the rest of Asia is growing, while Japan is contracting, and um, again, like none of these are value judgments, but like it just like I'm gonna kind of talk about why in a second when I talk about the history. But like if you look at Japan and you compare it to Europe, Japan looks a lot more like Europe. They just started plateauing a little bit earlier. But like post 2000, the Japanese economy and the European economy were pretty similar. And you also see this with like a whole host of other statistics, such as fertility rates, you know, all of these things. Japan, like my contention about Japan is that Japan is basically Europe. Like it's Europe but just in Asia. And the big tell of this is the economic story. But then also like I'm gonna skip ahead for a second. Like you just look at the history, right? Japan, Southeast Asia was conquered by France. This is conquered by England. This is conquered by the Dutch. Yeah, this is conquered by the Dutch. United Kingdom, the United States, United Kingdom. China was kind of like broken up a little bit. Like it's like a very complicated history where like their dynasty was basically like a figurehead for the Europeans. But Japan was Japan. Like Japan basically, in 1857 when Matthew Perry came, not like the actor, like the American guy, he basically just like forced Japan to open, and then Japan went through this huge modernizing streak, and because of that, Japan like became the imperial power in Asia. Like Japan basically like a lot of the other Asian countries were like fighting Westernism or just like were gotten colonized, and Japan was basically like, okay, America scared the shit out of us. We're just gonna become America in Asia, and so they started, their empire, and this is where it was at, in 1942, where they basically conquered the rest of Asia. So like, you kind of get the sense, especially when you talk to like other people in Asia, that like Japan, like they kind of view Japan a little bit like the rest of the world views like European colonial powers. Like it's just these people who like took over us. You know what I mean? Like so it's kind of weird to kind of see Japan as like, oh, it's an Asian power, because it really like you were the guys who like conquered the rest of Asia and also like committed a lot of atrocities while doing so. But then like you also like look at like other history. Like I just kind of have like two graphs that I just want to like point out. Like Japan was kind of like not included in the rest of Asian history, if that kind of makes sense. Like you have all of these wars between all of these different tribes, not tribes, but like kingdoms. That's a little condescending. I apologize. In Asia, right? Like so, for example, this is the Mongolian Empire. This is like the 10 kingdoms of China, and they're all like fighting each other. But like while fighting each other, they're all like communicating, and they're all like sharing cultures, and they're all like sharing a general sense of how they do things. While Japan is kind of on off to the side, where they're protected by the I don't know, the Japanese Sea. That was the reason why they weren't invaded, by the Mongolians. Is that Kublai Khan's navy got destroyed, but like because of that, they also were kind of left out, I think. And so you have all these cultures that kind of grew and developed together, and then you have Japan off to the side that got the same influx, but like the history of Japan is a history of civil war, is a history of these people in Japan just like fighting against each other and not really caring what goes on in Asia. And I think that's really important to understand, like why Japan is so different than the rest of Asia. Is that like their history was just different, right? And this is kind of like what I was alluding to a little earlier, is that like like the rest of Asia just kind of feels like each other. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of get this like like Asian feel. You know what I mean? And like Japan just doesn't feel like the rest of the continent. Um, but yeah, and then just like talking about like food, if you've never had Asian food, like it's kind of easy to. I really need to like build these a lot better. I'm just gonna like minimize this. So if you've never had Asian food, it's pretty easy to like um, view Japanese food and like Chinese food and Thai food as the same, right? But like once you actually like go and like have a lot of the food, you realize that like it's very very different. Like I can't imagine this being served in so this is crab pao in Thailand. And it's great. I love it. I just can't conceive of a dish like this being served in Japan as a Japanese dish. And even if you look at the soup, this is what's it called? This is like pho in Cambodia, and this is ramen. And like even the ramen like feels very orderly, and you even compare the ramen. This is ramen that I got in Indonesia to ramen in Japan, and it just like it's just so completely different. Um, I took a lot more pictures of Japanese food than I did of the rest of Asian food. Um, so yeah, like the food feels very different. Like a lot of Asian food has a lot of spice to it. Japanese food doesn't really have spice to it. Even like wasabi and sushi is not spicy. And even look at this. Like this is like drunk food that I got at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and it looks like so perfect and orderly. And it was like $4, but it was just like even the drunk food we have to make perfect. It's just kind of the Japanese ethos. And then you also like see this like with the religion. Like yes, they are all Buddhist, but like the Buddhism feels very different in Japan versus the rest of Asia. Where like, and I think this is like so Japanese, you know, they're um they're Shinto and Buddhist, right? Which are two different religions, but a lot of people are like both. And like it just feels like a different type of Buddhism than like, you know, this is in Cambodia, this is in Thailand, this is in Indonesia. Like the temples just feel different, man. So I know I'm kind of like getting being like redundant and kind of reductive, but I think that is kind of like the big thing is that like, you know, going to Japan and going to the rest of Asia, they just feel very different, and Japan just kind of feels a lot like Germany. And it's telling because like what happened was when Japan got um, what's it called, like opened up, their emperor sent people all across Europe to decide like what country should they emulate, and they actually landed on Germany. That's why they were allied with them in World War II. Was that Japan modeled itself off of Germany. Its government was very similar to Germany's government, and like I just think that Japan is basically Asian Germany is like the best way that I can think about it. Like no two countries in my mind are as similar as Japan and Germany, even though they're on completely opposite sides of the world. You know, Japanese people don't jaywalk. I mean, again, like I'm not like making a statement that like no Japanese person ever jaywalks. But you go to Japan, no one's jaywalking. You go to Cambodia, there aren't even like stop signs. There aren't even lights in a lot of places. People just go, right? And it's just a very different experience. So yeah, so what's the point of all this? I mean, nothing really. Like, who really gives a shit? But it's just like an interesting food for thought about like the different cultures in Asia. And I'd love to hear your guys' opinion. Like, do you tell me in the comments? Do you think, if you've been, do you think Japan is like Asia, or like does it actually feel a lot more like Germany? And by the way, this isn't just like with Japan. I do think that like most continents and most places have like one or two countries that just kind of feel out of place. For example, Africa, they don't really consider Egypt to be part of Africa. Egypt is Middle East. Get out of here. Italy, personally, feels a lot more like South America to me than it does like Europe. Um, So yeah, this isn't just like a Japanese thing. I mean, obviously, like Australia is not really part of, you know, Oceania, but that's for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, let me know. Like, comment, subscribe, and follow me for more. Till next time.